Lines. A big moment for North-South relations. The Inter-Korean Liaison Office, which allows 24/7 communication between the two Koreas, opens within the hour in the North Korean border town of Kaesong. Thrashing out the fine details for next week's summit in the North Korean capital, officials from the two Koreas are set to discuss issues like security arrangements, media coverage, and the size of the respective delegations. Plus, bringing down the hammer, the United States sanctions two companies, one in China and the other in Russia, for helping the North Korean regime develop its nuclear weapons program. So, the long-awaited Inter-Korean Liaison Office opens today at North Korea's border city of Kaesong. It was originally planned to open last month, but was delayed due to a diplomatic deadlock with the United States. For more, let's speak to our Park Hee-jun at Seoul's Unification Ministry. Hee-jun, tell us more about why the office is so important for both Koreas.
Well, the liaison office is a 24-hour, all-year-long running operation channel between the two Koreas, and it aims to boost inter-Korean exchanges in various levels and also in various fields. Now, Mark, it's the first time ever since the two Koreas were divided that such a communication channel is being opened, and an opening ceremony will be held in about 30 minutes at Kaesong, attended by some 50 people from each side. Now, from the south, participants will include the Minister and Vice Minister of the Unification Ministry. There will also be a fair number of experts and business people. To help you better understand the liaison office, the two Koreas have been using the Panmunjom channel, but it has its limits because of the distance and because it didn't operate around the clock. The liaison office in Kaesong corrects those issues, and what's more, the office can send messages directly to South Korean President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. A regular meeting will be held every week to discuss urgent issues relevant to the two Koreas, including economic cooperation. And the facility will be supervised by the Vice Minister of Seoul's Unification Ministry, Chun Hae-sung. It's not yet known who the representative from the North will be, but it will be someone at the Vice Minister level. Around 20 officers from each side will reside at the office, working 9 to 5 shifts during the weekdays, as well as overnight shifts and weekend duty. Now, the office will begin operating right away after the ceremony, and that'll mark the start of a permanent contact channel for the two Koreas, a fundamental step for stabilizing inter-Korean ties. And the Unification Ministry says that depending on the level of improvement in relations, South and North Korea could consider setting up offices in each other's capitals. And the liaison office was something agreed at the Panmunjom Declaration by the two Koreas on April 27, and it's going to contribute to help establish a lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula. Mark, I'll hand things back over to you.
Well, thank you very much to our Park Hee-jun there for that comprehensive report, all while a briefing was going on, apparently, behind her. Now, we are going to turn to South Korea's top office. That's where officials have left to meet their North Korean counterparts ahead of next week's summit. They're laying the groundwork for that. Our Shin Se-min's at the presidential office for us and is on the line. Se-min, we know that the South Korean officials have already left Seoul, but what else, if anything, do we know at this moment?
Right. The press corps received a message at around 7:30 this morning that informed us of their departure to the inter-Korean border village of Panmunjom. Now, during their talks today, we should be able to learn some of the details about the upcoming summit between the leaders next week, which will be held in the North Korean capital for the third time in modern Korean history. And today's meeting will be about President Moon's itinerary and some of the schedules and events to be held during his 3-day stay in the North Korean capital from next Tuesday. And on top of that, there is the list of South Korean delegates who will accompany the president, which the two Koreas have already agreed to cap at 200 people. But, Mark, we already do know a few people who will be definitely joining the president, the newly elected chair of the ruling Democratic Party, Lee Hae-chun, and some South Korean business leaders as well. And we should know the full list soon in the matter of hours' time. And the two sides are also set to hash out some of the details like security and the extent of media coverage as well. Back to you.
Thank you very much for that report, Se-min. Hopefully we'll hear some updates from you later. Just a reminder that you can watch coverage of the summit all next week here on Arirang TV, in particular the Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. That's when President Moon and his delegation will be in Pyongyang. Now, the United States has slapped sanctions on a Chinese company and a Russian firm for allegedly lending a helping hand to North Korea in its development of nuclear weapons. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
In the latest wave of punitive measures on Thursday, the United States sanctioned 2 companies in China and Russia for their alleged role in facilitating the North's nuclear weapons program. The U.S. Department of Treasury said it's sanctioning China Silver Star, which they say is nominally a Chinese IT company, but in reality managed and controlled by North Koreans. Also sanctioned is the firm's CEO, Chung Sung-hwa, and its Russia-based front company, Volusys Silver Star. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said the actions are intended to stop the flow of illicit revenue to North Korea from overseas information technology workers, disguising their true identities and hiding behind front companies, aliases, and third-party nationals. He warned the IT industry, businesses, and individuals across the globe to take precautions to ensure they're not unwittingly hiring North Korean workers for technology projects, reaffirming the U.S. will continue to enforce sanctions until the final, fully verified denuclearization of North Korea. The U.S. Treasury says China Silver Star is linked to the North Korean ruling party's munitions industry department, which it says is responsible for overseeing the regime's ballistic missile program. It's also said to be tied to the Korea Guryonggang Trading Corporation, which is accused of being responsible for procuring commodities and technologies to support North Korea's defense research and development programs. The latest sanctions call for blocking any property or interests of the designated entities and individuals within the U.S., as both companies are being sanctioned for their alleged role in exporting workers from North Korea. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
So let's continue with our pre-summit special coverage. It's an exciting time here on the Korean Peninsula because we are just now D-4 until the highly anticipated 2018 Inter-Korean Summit Pyeongyang. That's the official name. It's going to be between, of course, South Korean President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Our Blue House correspondent Hwang Ho-jun is now going to take a look at the agenda of the third summit between these two leaders and what we might expect out of what will be a truly historic meeting.
This year's first Inter-Korean Summit in April was a landmark in inter-Korean relations. The second one, behind closed doors in May, resuscitated talks between Pyongyang and Washington and ultimately made possible the historic Kim-Trump summit in Singapore. So for the third Inter-Korean Summit of 2018, what might be on the table?
In this summit, the two Koreas have agreed to review the implementation of the Panmunjom Declaration and discuss its future direction. Also, they will draw up practical ways to establish a lasting peace and to ensure joint prosperity, especially through the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Probably the most significant point to watch this time in Pyongyang will be President Moon resuming his role as the so-called mediator between North Korea and the U.S., especially with relations between Pyongyang and Washington seemingly deadlocked. North Korea has demanded that in conjunction with its denuclearization efforts, the Korean War must be declared officially over. But the U.S. has insisted that North Korea first take practical steps, such as disclosing the status of its nuclear facilities and ballistic missiles. The tension led to President Trump canceling his Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's planned visit to Pyongyang last month. So the spotlight will be on whether President Moon is able to come up with a compromise for the two sides and break through the stalemate. Also on the agenda, of course, will be practical measures to continue improving relations between Seoul and Pyongyang. The two Koreas have already kept some of the promises they made in April, establishing a joint liaison office and holding dialogue and negotiations in various fields. Check. Jointly participating in international sporting events such as the 2018 Asian Games. Check. Holding reunions of separated families. check. And of course, the summit in Pyongyang itself is also a fulfillment of the Panmunjom Declaration. So this time, it seems they'll need to talk about easing military tensions and boosting their economic cooperation. President Moon has insisted that advancements in inter-Korean relations are the driving force behind the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. It will be the first time the two leaders have met in 4 months, so the world is eager to hear their assessment of how much progress has been made toward the goal of putting a formal end to the Korean War by the end of this year, as stated in the Panmunjom Declaration. Panmunjom, Arirang News.
So, as we just heard from our Ho-Jun there, thanks to the Panmunjom Declaration signed back in April by the leaders of the two Koreas, President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un are going to meet for their third round of talks next week from Tuesday through till Thursday. And since that agreement, a lot has changed on the Korean peninsula, most of it for the good. Kim Mo-kyun explains.
It's still hard to say whether the last couple of inter-Korean summits have been successful, but the pledges made in the Panmunjom Declaration, signed at the first one in April, have definitely given fresh momentum to practical dialogue between the two Koreas. Since the Panmunjom Declaration was signed 5 months ago, things have changed diplomatically, and there have been exchanges in culture and economics. Interaction between the two leaders and their top officials has become more frequent. The two sides joined together in international sporting events, and the family reunions proceeded just as stated in the Panmunjom Declaration. A political expert says that the agreement eased tensions and opened the road to peace.
When we look at the atmosphere on the Korean peninsula early this year, it was tense, with some even saying we were on the brink of war. It's still early to say that the crisis is completely over, but since the declaration, the two Koreas seem to have been on the same page, both of them hoping to move towards peace and reconciliation.
The expert said that this is natural in the negotiation process and that the situation still seems to be positive.
The tug-of-war was expected and will likely continue. But with the North ceasing its missile and nuclear provocations lately, even during its founding anniversary, we can say that things now tend toward the bright side.
The expert said that at this point, the South Korean government should actively play its role as a mediator, not only between Washington and Pyongyang, but also among China, Japan, and Russia, facilitating a discussion of each other's interests and helping them reach a compromise that's best for everyone. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
Let's turn to some domestic economic news now. South Korea's import and export prices, they fell for the month of August, and this was mainly to do with the weakening Korean won. For more details, let's turn to our Kim Hae-sung.
Korea's export and import prices both fell in August. According to the Bank of Korea Friday, export prices dropped 0.1% from the previous month on the weakening local currency, which fell against the US dollar by 0.1% on month to an average of 1,121 Korean won. Compared to the same period last year, export prices went up around 2%. By item, exports of agricultural goods went up 0.6% on month, but the rise was offset by falling prices for industrial goods like primary metals and textile products. Import prices in August also fell by 0.2% on month. The bank attributed the drop to lower global oil prices. Dubai crude went down by nearly 1% on month to $72.50 a barrel. Prices of intermediary goods and consumer goods fell. Raw material prices also dropped 0.4% on month on lower prices for industrial goods. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Now, preparing for the Chuseok holiday, or Korean Thanksgiving, is more expensive than usual this year as a record-breaking heatwave and a typhoon impacted agricultural yields, meaning Koreans have to dig deeper to fill out their table for the traditional ancestral rites. Recognizing the increased financial burden on working-class families, the government has introduced a series of measures in a bid to try, at least, to stabilize grocery prices. So Eun-kyung with this report.
It is that time of the year when Koreans start preparing gifts they'll be used to celebrate the upcoming Chuseok holiday, also known as the Korean Thanksgiving. Retailers have already started displaying gifts that are sold at various prices. However, this year, shoppers may want to think twice before making a purchase.
Vegetables are so expensive this year, so I am afraid of going grocery shopping. Also, I usually send a gift set of fruits to acquaintances ahead of Chuseok, but I'm considering opting for processed goods this year.
Drought and heavy rainfall during the summer led to price hikes both in vegetables and fruit, increasing financial burden on customers. On average, a household is expected to spend between $200 to $300 to celebrate Chuseok. But according to the Korea Agro-Fisheries and Food Trade Corporation, the price range has jumped by more than 5% this year compared to 2017. Apple prices rose by more than 70% compared to last year. Other staple ingredients widely sought after the Chuseok holiday, such as spinach, white radish, Napa cabbage, and pears, have become more expensive.
Compared to last year, sales of fruit sets are sluggish so far this year.
In response, the Ministry of Economy and Finance laid out plans late August to increase the supply of 14 of the most popular food items.
Napa cabbage harvest was bad due to the heat wave, especially by the end of August. Back then, the retail price of Napa cabbage went up to about $7 per head. However, with the government introducing measures, it dropped by 23% in 2 weeks.
A local expert called for more proactive measures from the government in order to stabilize food prices.
Increasing supply falls short of lowering prices of these items. Providing financial support to privately owned retailers could help recover their profit margin.
He emphasized that more coordination is needed between the businesses and authorities to optimally manage prices and supplies. Seoul, Arirang News.
Now, if you like your history and you are in Korea right now, you'll want to pay extra close attention to this next report, because a museum that shows us a glimpse of what life was like in Seoul several centuries ago has opened right here in the South Korean capital. Im Min-sun went to check it out, and this is her report.
600 years of history were uncovered in the heart of Seoul on Wednesday. The Gongpyeong Historic Sites Museum displays remains and dwelling sites from the Joseon Dynasty in a newly built 26-story building in Jongno-gu district. With more than 3,800 square meters of floor area, it's the city's largest museum that preserves relics and dwelling sites at the very places where they were discovered. More than 200 everyday items from the past are preserved here. You can see the sites of 16th and 17th century buildings and alleys by walking along the transparent glass floors. Must-see displays are the remains of 3 different types of Joseon Dynasty homes. Visitors can see what's left of the old houses and compare them to life-size reproductions. Virtual reality gear lets you explore even more of the inside of the old-time houses of Seoul. Dozens of porcelain dishes with personal marks indicating who owns them hint at how people used to borrow dishes from their neighbors for parties or big family events.
It is really cool that I can see these relics in the middle of the city.
Its first building project in the city, in which the relics found at the construction site were preserved right where they were found. The building's private developer was allowed to put 4 extra stories on it in exchange for preserving the original site and turning the basement floor into a museum that's open to public for free.
Previously, when relics were found on building sites, only some of them were preserved and at a separate location. But this time, the whole thing was preserved after close consultation with the developer. We've called this the Gongpyeong rule.
The city of Seoul plans to make Gongpyeong a blueprint for managing age-old cultural properties discovered in the future during urban development. Im Min-sun, Arirang News.
Hurricane Florence has started lashing the U.S. coastal state of North Carolina with extremely heavy rain and powerful winds. On the other side of the globe, another potentially devastating typhoon is inching ever and ever closer to the Philippines. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Noah Adam. So Adam, fill us in on the latest on these two huge storms.
Indeed, Mark. If we start with Hurricane Florence, this has been downgraded to a Category 2 storm, but officials are warning that it remains still very dangerous. Although winds have weakened slightly, they are still clocking a powerful 165 kilometers per hour. Heavy rain has also started to drench the coast of North Carolina, and roads have already started to flood. The worst, however, is yet to be seen, as the hurricane is expected to hover over the Carolinas for days, whipping hurricane-force winds and dumping relentless rain. The eye of the storm is forecast to make landfall on Friday afternoon local time. About 1 million people across 3 states have been ordered to evacuate. Thousands of residents have fled further inland, while others are staying in emergency shelters. Meanwhile, thousands of people have also begun fleeing coastal areas of the Philippines as a super typhoon heads towards the north of the country. Typhoon Mangkhut is due to make landfall on Luzon Island by Saturday, and it was packing winds of 285 kilometers per hour. That is the equivalent of a Category 5 hurricane and much stronger than the current Hurricane Florence. Mangkhut is being described as the strongest typhoon to hit the Philippines this year. It has already torn through the northern Mariana Islands and Guam, with some parts still out of power on Thursday. Southern parts of China, including Hong Kong, are also bracing the typhoon's arrival later in the weekend. In other news, Turkey is banning the use of foreign currency in the country's property market in a new bid to support the ailing local currency. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan issued a decree on Thursday stating that sales contracts and rental agreements in foreign currency must be converted into lira within 30 days. The move comes as Turkey's central bank increased interest rates by a hefty 6.25 percentage points to 24% in order to save the currency. The lira has lost some 40% of its value against the dollar this year alone, over concerns about Erdogan's influence on monetary policy and a diplomatic spat between Turkey and the United States. Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi has made a rare admission that her government could have handled violence against Rohingya Muslims better. She made the comments on Thursday at the World Economic Forum on ASEAN in the Vietnamese capital, Hanoi. However, she defended the jailing of 2 Reuters journalists who were reporting on the crisis, denying their conviction had anything to do with freedom of expression.
It's not a matter of they were not jailed because they were journalists. They were jailed because the court has, sentence has been passed on them because the court has decided that they had broken the Official Secrets Act. So if we believe in the rule of law, they have every right to appeal the judgment and to point out why the judgment is wrong if they consider it wrong.
Her comments prompted a sharp rebuke from the US ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, who, in a tweet, described the leader's remarks as, quote, unbelievable. The jail of the journalist has sparked international condemnation, and the UN has called for top figures in the Burmese military to be investigated for genocide.
Good morning. Rain clouds are dropping showers on the southern regions. In fact, Tongyang in Gyeongsang-Namdo province is under heavy rain advisory. And there could be heavy downpours at times, while rest of the country will see light rainfall into Saturday. And the further south you are, the more likely it's that you will see more rainfall. In southern regions, we'll have highs slightly higher than yesterday, but up north, we'll see a tad lower temperatures, getting up to 27 degrees Celsius here in the capital. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Friday morning here in Seoul. Stay tuned to Arirang TV and we'll have our next newscast at noon Korea time with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. Until then, goodbye.